When I lost my parents, I experienced profound grief and sadness. I felt that I would never be normal again. Life was really hard. Getting out of bed was hard. Ugh. I felt as though the sheer sadness of it all would never end, and my thoughts were consumed with what ifs. What if I could have done things differently? What if I could have been a different person while they were alive? Of how I could have been better. I could have been a better daughter, a better person. I felt shame for not doing all those things I didn't do, but I should have done. And I also felt a lot of shame for devaluating my mother. Although that was the most challenging and heartbreaking experience of my life, I have suffered a lot of loss in my life. And it's okay to feel grief. Grief is a natural part of life. It takes time, so give yourself some time. Grief is about loss. It could be a loss of a person. It could be a loss of a situation. It could be a loss of health. It could be a potential loss, such as facing something like a divorce or severe illness or something like that and wondering what will happen next. In this episode of the You Don't Owe Me podcast, we'll talk about the signs and symptoms of grief, things I learned that can help you to start moving forward again. Grief is unique to each person. There are a few symptoms or signs that a lot of people feel when going through grief. Here's just a few of them. Again, everyone's different. Upset stomach or butterflies in your stomach, tightness in your upper body, like you can't breathe well. Some people feel like they're having a heart attack or a stroke. This was certainly me. Oversensitive to noise and lots of chaos in a room, like a restaurant or something like that, or TV or movies or anything that hits the senses. It could be even smell, taste, even how something feels, like the fabric of your couch all of a sudden kind of becomes intolerable. The feeling of doubt that it didn't really happen. What is your reality anyway? You question what's happening as though you were in a dream. Lack of energy, feeling overly tired, needing to get out of bed, but not wanting to go out because it takes too much effort, not taking care of yourself because it's too hard. You can also have feelings of giving up, like, I just can't do it anymore. You can have dryness in your mouth or skin rashes, extreme sadness. Some people have a lot of anger. You can have guilt about what you could have done differently, anxiety and panic attacks, certainly me, feeling insecure or that you can't take care of yourself now or that the person is no longer there, so who's going to fill that gap and you can't do it by yourself. A natural response to grief is to close yourself off from the experience that caused you grief. You may subconsciously feel that because a loved one has left in the past, that moving forward, you try not to get in too deep with anyone for fear of losing them and the feelings of how intense that loss was for you. So kind of getting closed off as you move forward. Loneliness, when you lose someone you love. Helplessness, which is a part of feeling alone, that you can't do life without the other person. Sometimes there can be shock, even if you knew it was coming. Yearning for things that go back to the way they were, romanticizing the relationship into something that it wasn't. Relief. Often an oppressive relationship ends, you'll feel relief, which is often followed by a feeling of being ashamed that you even feel that way. This can also happen when you are the primary caretaker during the dying process. And then you harbor a lot of guilt as a consequence of having those feelings. Numbness and feeling overwhelmed at everything, feeling as though it's just too hard to carry on. Grief is different for everyone. Everyone experiences it differently and has their timeline and how they're moving through it. Finding supportive spaces is essential. While people may take longer than others to overcome the feelings associated with grief, it will never completely go away. It will only become more manageable over time. The intention is not to forget the situation occurred or to deny that the situation occurred, but to be able to live with life lessons with grace and compassion. However, staying with intense grief too long can also be a problem. Finding a space of support is significant for people as they move forward. Grief can compound. It causes you to review other things in your life that were sad or that you did wrong or any other type of loss that you have, especially if you have feelings of guilt. When you find yourself thinking things like, Why does this always happen to me? Why does everyone always leave me? Why am I always being punished? It's important to keep away from this line of thinking. It won't really serve you. I'm talking about looking for correlation to things that keep coming up for you. I'm not talking about that. That is something to look at. If something keeps returning to you, why is that? What does it keep presenting itself? What do you need to learn so that you won't have reoccurring situations happen to you? That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about piling grief on top of itself so that it becomes this situation of somehow the world is against you. One strategy for solving issues in your life is a good one when applied correctly. That is the strategy of looking at correlation in your life and why certain things keep appearing. That's important when you're trying to learn new things, to approach things that happen in terms of what do I need to learn here? What am I not getting is important. But be mindful that you aren't using bad things that happen to validate unworthiness or lack of self-love or to create self-judgment. Using grief to validate negative beliefs about yourself is not the answer. So what I'm saying here is looking for correlation and saying, what can I learn here? What am I not getting? Might be a very useful approach to things that routinely happen in your life. But to apply that towards grief or to use it to validate your unworthiness because you're just stacking it on top of each other can really be damaging to you over time. Some people may not even allow themselves to experience grief. It might cause them to protect themselves from experiences by becoming distant from others or not loving deeply. Some people may have strong feelings of love, but they won't show it because they don't want the other person to love them in the same way, because then it makes love more real and much harder to deal with when someone leaves. Studies show that people can develop a sort of chronic grief. Chronic grief can lead to feelings of hopelessness, loss of meaning in life, severe clinical depression, self-harm, and even suicidal ideology. If this is something that's happening to you, please consider seeking a professional. How can you help someone move forward through grief or overcome it yourself? Here's a few tools that really helped me to sort of move forward with my grief. It doesn't go away, but it makes it so that you can continue on with life. Talk about it in a concrete sense and an emotional sense. So finding people that have been able to move forward through grief is helpful, but if you don't have that, find people that understand your feelings and can create a space for you to explore your feelings and beliefs. Also, think about the concrete parts of the grief. If someone passed, what was the date that they passed? Some concrete things so that you don't start feeling like, is this a dream? What is really my reality? You want to kind of stay in the present. Yes, this happened. And I need to talk through what this means for me and my life moving forward and how I feel about things. Outline your feelings or things that have changed since the situation occurred. Are you more anxious, sad? Is it hard to get out of bed? Do you cry often? That was a big one for me. Are you guilty or ashamed, etc.? Why are you this way? Sometimes people feel ashamed if a person who passed, which can bring on a host of challenging feelings, if a person engaged in deviant behavior or caused harm to others, you may feel guilty or embarrassed about the situation by association. That can lead you to feel ashamed about thinking of them as someone you miss or that you're associated with. It can become a circle of feelings that can lead you down a deep hole. So, what I'm trying to say here is be cognizant of your feelings. Notice if you're feeling more of these things. Some things are part of grief. And if you're feeling guilty or ashamed, etc., really explore that. Why is that? Is it because you wish you had been different to the person while they were around? Or is it kind of this embarrassed by association because the person wasn't that great of a person? And now you're trying to reconcile love you had for the person, but also impressions of others who didn't like the person. And that can be really challenging. Be practical. What do you need to do to ensure that you can move forward without the person or thing in your life? Ask yourself questions like, what problems am I now facing and how can I fix them? And what tasks do I need to do to move forward? What did the person do for me that I now have to do for myself? What do I need to do to find happiness in a new expression of life? How can I feel confident and complete again? No need to rush here. This takes time. Sometimes there is a period of feeling incapable of doing anything, or you might feel too overwhelmed at first. Take it slow. It can be theoretical before you put it into practice. You can think of only one thing a week that you need to shift. Finding meaning in the loss. Thinking of the loss in terms of having meaning, not as something that happened to me or why do bad things happen to me, is important. Go beyond the feeling sorry for yourself and try to find a deeper meaning. Ask yourself, how has this experience changed me? What positive aspects came from it? How can I learn from this experience? What new skills or empathy can I cultivate here? How can I use this experience to have deeper relationships? How can I live a more in the moment kind of lifestyle with less regret? How do I feel about loss? And how can I become more resilient without becoming less loving? What do I need to feel in order to feel more comfortable with change? Find a way of being in relationship with the person who passed. Can you find a way to see their guidance, even though they aren't physically present? Can you feel them when you visit a place they loved or eat a food they like, or on a particular day that was important to them? Find a way to be in relationship, even though it isn't the same. You can write letters to them, talk to them, comb through their physical life and find lessons that you learned through them. Did they have a rough childhood? What could you learn from that? Were they always positive, even at the worst of times? What can you learn from that? So sort of survey their life and what you know about them and see if there are any lessons you can take from that. That keeps them alive and also gives their life more meaning. Give yourself time to adjust to the world without the loved one. Know that on special days and things like that, it might trigger past feelings like holidays, birthdays, and such. If there was a time you always called them, like every Monday at 5 o'clock, find something new to do during that time frame. Maybe use the time as a homage to them by doing something they like to do. Maybe use the time to meditate or read because they love to read. Or maybe you just take the time to do some self-care. And don't be rigid about it. Say you use the time to think about them for a certain period of time, and after a couple of years, you might want to shift that and do something else. Maybe do self-care, or maybe it's free flow or whatever. We're just talking about creating a stepping stone from one way of being to another way of being. Don't worry about grieving like everyone else is doing it. This is your process and everyone is different. So if, say, there's a loss of a family member, everyone's going to grieve that person differently. And don't worry about how you're grieving it, as long as you are going through the grieving process. If you're in denial, that's kind of a different topic that you need to really explore with a healer or professional. If you are still grieving deeply past the time that you feel is appropriate, or you are having trouble readjusting to life, seek a healer or a therapist or a professional to help you understand and work through your feelings. Failure to acknowledge and embrace sadness can cause more complicated and prolonged grief. Not acknowledging the grief and giving yourself time to mourn will just cause it to resurface later in life, such as inability to love deeply and or to show others love, or you might have a problem always feeling detached and never attached to anyone. You might have relationship problems, inability to express yourself, inability to have a range of emotions that are appropriate for certain situations. You may allow anger to become your dominant trait. You may feel guilt or shame. You may develop a lot of self-pity. You may even have physical health issues. You may lose a job or friends or housing. You may increase ways that you self-medicate. These are just a few things that can happen if you turn off the grief and don't allow yourself to go through the process. Grieving is a process. It's a part of life. Surround yourself with resources, whether it be friends, family, YouTube videos, podcasts, spiritual practices, healing practices, exercise, therapy, meditation, prescribed medication, journaling, taking some PTO, books, workshops, a weekly survivors group, or all of the above, or something else. Reach out, talk about it, come to terms with it, find value in it, find lessons you can learn, Find compassion that you can cultivate. Find the value in all the experience that life brings. Life is both beautiful and sad, and perfectly expected that you find joy and sorrow and everything in between as you walk your path. This is hard and almost unbearable at times, but you are resilient. You are resilient. You can get through this. It will get better. When I lost my folks, I was really stricken with grief and so much more. It was so hard. I'm better now, but there are days when I feel the loss more profoundly than others, and it's hard sometimes even now. I don't think the loss will ever leave me, and frankly, I don't want it to. There is some beauty in it on some level. But I remind myself that it's part of life and you're not alone. If you found this podcast because you are going through loss, I want you to know that I'm sending you love. I'm sending you love. I know it isn't much, and people have misused that saying because people in power started using it as a cop-out. But I want you to know that when I say it, I mean it, and I'm thinking of you. And I do this daily during my meditation. I'm taking a moment to send love to everyone that needs it, and that includes you. And know that I love you and I support you. You will recover from this. You are resilient. You are strong. It gets easier. You will move forward. So take good care, my friend.